So this is a drawing, painting, of a city rising up out of the earth. And I've recorded the entire thing. It's about 16 hours from start to finish, a little over that. And I've condensed it down here to 3 hours and 15 minutes. I was going to condense it a lot more, but I felt like I was thinking about splitting it up into different parts and sections, or just doing it all in one big group or one big video and shortening it. But even at this length, it's still kind of hard to see what's going on. So this is about my limit here as far as how short I wanted to go. But I'm starting out just thinking about my composition. I know what the subject matter is, and I've done some studies, before this painting on what this city should look like. I've done a ton of different concepts, and this is actually for my day job, and I just decided to record it here and get a video out of it. But this is a cover of a short story that was done at my work called The Divine City Rising, and so this city has been levitated, been lifted out of the earth, and it's kind of a magical moment. And so really trying to capture the majesty of the moment and still kind of demonstrate what's going on in the scene and the environment. And so I'm thinking through my lighting here. I'm thinking through just really rough. I like to work with an airbrush because I don't like super hard lines at first. I don't always work this way. Sometimes I will just start out with hard lines, but when I'm kind of feeling things out, the more abstract I can make it, the better I can think through it. So I'm thinking about a light source coming from the side right, and I'm thinking about different materials. I'm thinking this base here is the bottom inverted pyramid there. That's a rock. That's kind of ground, and then the ring around the top is kind of a rock, metallic kind of compound. It's going to have some nice specular. It's going to have different specular highlights than the base will. I'm working in symmetry here just so you can kind of see, just so I make sure that the sides match up and everything, but I don't want this to be a straight-on photo or a straight-on image. This is not photo reference. In fact, there's no photos used in this painting at all. But you can see I put the red square on that top ring band off to the right, off-centered a little bit there, because I do want it turned. I don't want it just facing the user or the viewer. And this city has two parts. There is the main city down below, and then the kind of more exalted, higher point that floats above it. And they have similar visual language. The top one is a little bit more intricate. Done a lot more studies on the top one than the bottom. And here I'm thinking through the time of day. We've got a side light, so it's going to be golden hour. And I'm thinking through my composition in terms of where do I want these pieces, how big do I want them in the frame. And these things are emerging out of the ground, so that's the ground cavern that this has been pulled out of, essentially. Before this was lifted up, it was flush with the earth. It was kind of like a volcano almost, but you could see the ring as if it were connected to that volcano. So I roughly know where the horizon is. It's going to be in between the two cities. So you can kind of see the bottom of the very top city and the top of the bottom city there. But what I want, because I'm really trying to get away from using photo texture, is I'm just painting out a texture of my own, trying to get as many of the colors of the spectrum as I can in this. And then this is going to be my ground. I'm going to skew this into perspective, just trying to get this as textured as possible. Playing around with different levels of light. Because I'm thinking there's clouds in the sky. So you're going to have dappled light coming through and landing on the ground. So certain parts of the ground are going to be a little bit more lit up than others. I'm skewing it into perspective. Again, I know roughly where the horizon line is. And then I'm just eyeballing the perspective from there. The challenge here is a lot of times I'll get a nice texture and then it becomes precious and I don't want to paint over it. So sometimes I just have to scribble on top of it to kind of break that mental block. And what I like to do with my paintings is have them feel like they kind of emerged out of chaos. It's like I took a bunch of paint and scrubbed it into the canvas and this picture emerged. This idea, this order out of chaos, that's kind of what I go for, and not super successfully. I'm still hoping to figure this look out. It's a look I've been chasing for a long time, and I never feel like I've really nailed it. I feel like I'm starting to get a little bit closer. These images you see at the top of the page, or the top of the screen, those are the three on the left is the same one. I just duplicated it, but that's an actual oil painting on canvas that I did. I just laid down a bunch of paint on the canvas to kind of get some nice paint textures, and then scanned it, and then changed did a hue shift in Photoshop. And then the other three of those are the exact same one. I did this hue shift on those also, but those are internet paint textures that I found. And so I use those. I just kind of get this, I try to get a color spectrum up there. You can see, across those images, and then just mix and match on my own canvas. If you step back and look at that canvas when it was zoomed out right there, you can kind of just feel the picture starting to emerge from the mess. And it's a little bit, I realize it might be a little bit hard to watch with it zooming in and out like that, but I have to do that. Adobe's made this really fantastic hotkey that makes zooming in and out so easy and fast that it's like an extension of my hand. I don't even think about it. I just, shift or the command spacebar slide, and I'm zooming in and out because I got to see. I will often check after every single stroke if it fits in the overall painting or not. I'm pretty careful about every stroke that goes down, and I want it to, you can make and break a whole painting with a single stroke that's out of place. Most of the time they're neutral, they don't do anything, but you can have a bad one that ruins the whole thing. And maybe it breaks the light, it breaks the composition, or it breaks, the feeling of everything feeling like it's lit by the same light source. So you gotta be really careful with that. So that's why I'm zooming in and out all the time. But when I start doing the city here in a minute, I'll start detailing out here in a few minutes. I do stay at the same zoom level, about right here. I stay at the same zoom level here pretty quick for most of it. It gets a little bit easier to watch there, but at times when I was recording this, I was conscious of that and tried to not zoom in and out as much as possible. But when you get into the zone, it's hard to break that habit when you're not even thinking about it. Starting to think about the form here. I'm starting to think about it. So I've got a middle dome cylinder that's coming out of there, a cylinder and a dome in the center of the city. And then there's all these buildings that are offshoots of that, kind of going in the four cardinal directions. And they're interconnected with the outer ring in different ways. So I actually started out drawing this from top view. And I should probably show that. I might show a video of that, but it's a top view. I started out kind of like a plan view, just thinking about what buildings were where and what the pattern should look like. And then, that pattern kind of informed a lot of the other design that we were doing on this project. So this material here on the edge of this ring is going to get, it's facing the light source at that point, but it's also more specular. than this base part that I'm painting right now. But there are elements of silica and other maybe gemstone or other things, maybe a little bit of energy contained in that base. So that's why you see kind of that black or the dark reds and the bright reds next to each other. So I'm trying to capture that kind of glistening, gleaming feeling. And then thinking through how rock particles might be embedded in that cement rock metallic material of the top ring. And I had a problem as I kept zooming out and looking at this part. The two rings were the exact same height, and that was really bothering me. I wanted a little bit of contrast there. I wanted one to be bigger than the other. So I'll adjust that here in a moment, but thinking through the different, there's a little bit of a concentric ring pattern happening within the layout of the city on top. So I'm thinking about nesting these rings within it from this view. How would that look? And then there's these vertical structures that are built on top of the ring at certain parts, kind of like ramparts that are, I don't know if they're defensive, but they were originally designed to be gateways when it was ground-bound. It was on the ground. These were especially this red one, not the one I'm working on here, but the one to the left of that. That one is kind of the main gate that goes into the city when it was on the ground. Foreshortening is always interesting. It's always such a headache to draw. I'm thinking about how would this other vertical structure that's going to be... So 4 of the structures are unique and the other 4 are short. So there's 4 tall and 4 short. And this is one of the tall ones, and I'd alternate. So this is the tall one, then that one is a middle one, or a lower one, and then the one on its left is a tall one. And so I got to think about how that's going to fit. How are those going to stagger each other when you're looking at it from this camera angle? What parts are going to be overlapping? Yeah, and I realized here I wasn't doing my alternating pattern. I need a short one there. And then this short one is going to be, well, it's not connected, but it's pretty closely connected with the structures that are coming off of that dome. Yeah, and here I realized I was a little bit, I wanted it to be a little bit closer to the horizon. Flatten it out, and then here I'm fixing that. Yeah, I wanted that bottom ring to be about twice the height of the ring right up on top of it. It really did make a big difference. In fact, this part of the painting that I'm about to do here, yeah, the strokes right there, that ended up being my favorite part of the whole painting, even to the end. That right there, that is the look that I've been chasing. That's what I'm trying to get. And it's just certain moments that just works. And you keep trying to recapture it, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work. But sometimes, just like magic, it just feels great. It defines the form, but it does it in a really loose way. There's always that balance of defining a form but still being loose. It's funny, that's about the only part of the painting I'm super happy with. The rest of it I would probably redo over and over again. In fact, I did paint this twice. You'll see me later in the video, I restart. I don't restart. I do restart, but I end up merging the two because the rest of this painting was frustrating me so badly. So now I'm starting to define the forms of the city a little bit more closely, and I'm just jumping to a round brush there. And I find I think a little bit faster with just a round brush. It simplifies things, and I'm able to just kind of go without worrying too much about what the strokes are feeling like and looking like. But the drawback, and you'll see me mess with this, is that it doesn't look great. The finish is important to me. Like, a lot of people say it doesn't matter what brush you use and it just matters the structure and all that, and I agree with that to a point. But if you can get the structure and have great looking brush strokes, then that's a better result in my opinion. And when I'm just going with a round brush, I mean, it's passable, it looks okay, the forms are defined. I have a background in industrial design, and so I'm really into defining 3D form and being able to draw forms from any angle from my head. Like, that's a pretty important skill I think anyone should have. But when I'm thinking through the forms, it's like a different mental process. And so I went back to the other paintbrush. You'll see, I'll jump into the round brush here soon. But it's a different thought process here. I'm thinking about two things simultaneously when I'm using this mixer brush. I'm thinking about defining the structure, thinking about making sure that it reads, but I'm also thinking about, does the stroke help define the form in an interesting way? I don't think it's enough to just tell the form. I think it needs to be visually interesting, because I'm seeing forms defined everywhere. And 3D is obviously very, very good at defining form, but it's not very interesting visually, and there's not enough personality in there. I want personality to be injected into every stroke. I feel like you should be able to tell an artist from the paint strokes, from the marks that they make. This building, it is symmetrical, but because the camera is turned, I can't just draw it in symmetry. I've got to think about this. It's not a 3/4 view, but it's turned. The camera's turned. So I'm seeing two sides of this back side and one side of that far side. I should clarify my stroke comment just now. The idea that it doesn't matter what brush you're using. I will say, if your foundation isn't there, if the foundation of the form isn't there, if the form isn't reading, then it doesn't matter what your brush stroke looks like, it's going to look bad. I'm saying, once you have that foundation, once the form is defined, the drawing is good, it reads well, then where do I get my personality? How do I inject personality into that? Yeah, here's where I had reached a point of, I needed to simplify my thinking here, so I just jumped into the round brush. When I'm doing those top surfaces of those forms, I did use a jagged paintbrush, because the form is really clear in my mind at that point, and when the form is clear, I will just go into paint stroke. But yeah, you can see I'm just going straight to lines here. I really was getting frustrated with these forms not lining up and how things weren't coming together. So now I'm thinking about, okay, how do I make this actually work in 3D space? So I just resorted just to straight line drawing just to lay it all out, and then I went back in and painted on top of this. So like I said, I've got this plan view that I drew from the top with the dome in the center, and then these domes out to the side of this large structure. But it's all flat. It's just a 2D line drawing, flat, no elevation. It's just straight looking bird's eye view down on this. And so I know basically where things should go. So there's a series of buildings that come out to make this sort of geometric pattern. And I'm trying to get it to look right in this kind of 3/4 view in 3D. And it got so bad I went in and just had to lay out my perspective lines. Laid out a perspective grid, and now I'm really going to go heavy on the lines here. Oh yeah, I also did ellipse guides to help me. That's how crazy this got. So this dome has all these, there's all these concentric circles that are happening within this design, and you've got the different edges that are indenting. And so I just went through and created a series of ellipses. So I can create selection guides. Yeah, just like that. So that's my top surface there. So just get my selection right. Boom. All right, so I got my gray. That's settled. Now we got to expand this, and yeah, now I can get the sides of my dome, or the cylinder leading up to the dome. But I did it in 2 different levels. So there's this ring, and then it expands from here. And I just reached a point where I realized it was going to take longer if I tried to eyeball it and then tried to fix it, as opposed to just getting it right with some ellipse guides first. And honestly, that's how I would work on paper anyway. I would just get my ellipse guides and just go from there. I wouldn't really take a whole lot of chances if I'm doing a more finished painting like this. Top surface of that second ring. So I'm thinking about these other structures, these other buildings that are adjacent to this large center one. I'm thinking about how high up they come next to the main building. And I'm thinking through the levels, how many times do I want to extrude these up? Getting that fill light in on that left side. So it's just a basic lighting setup, just low sunlight on the right side is my key light, and then I've just got the atmospheric ambient light on the left. making sure those forms join together. All the forms make sense. The forms have to make sense, or it just doesn't matter how good your paint strokes look. If the forms don't connect, if the forms don't fit together, if the 3D space isn't working, nothing else really matters. Yeah, you know it's serious when the lasso comes out. Yeah, that's when it's time to take no prisoners. Notice right there I stamped in some of the texture in the sky to create that contrast with that flat roof surface of that building there with the lasso selected. This is a smaller dome that is going to be completely in shadow. Yeah. I kind of like drawing in shadows because I try not to do a whole lot of detail in the shadows, but so it really comes down to really subtle hue shifts within the shadow to tell the form. Craig Mullins has a video that he did on schoolism, painting a sci-fi image from start to finish, and I can't tell you how many times I've watched that video. And I love it on there, and one of the things that he harps on is keeping the edges within shadow areas really soft. And it really magically helps your painting feel like there's actual light in there. Keep the edges sharp in the light and blurred in the dark. It just really, it's like a magic look good button. Good perspective is also a good magic good look good button as well. I'm a sucker for good perspective. I remember when I was learning to draw, and I couldn't even see perspective. Like my instructor would tell me that's out of perspective, but I couldn't see it. It did not register to my eye. It was something I had to learn to do, and once I saw it, once I learned to see it, I can't unsee it. It's everywhere now. I see good perspective, I see bad perspective everywhere, and it's become a curse. But only in the best possible way. One of the things I'm trying to do with that top surface there is get some subtle gradients from cools to warms. Helps that surface feel a little more alive, a little more real. So I've created a new ellipse guide for the top of those ramparts as well as the bottom. So we're going to make those line up. So I'm bringing it along that perspective line, even though technically it's on a circle, but so you just kind of gotta eyeball that. It worked here, so I got the front of those. Now I need the back. Yep. Now I got that top surface ready to go. Boom. Just kind of eyeballing this one here. Eyeball the distance. The distance between them. I don't know how close I was on that, but it never visually bothered me, so I don't know. I think it's okay. Again, I don't want this piece symmetrical, so, I mean, it is symmetrical, but I don't want this camera view symmetrical, so this edge is going to be, this left edge is going to be different from that right edge. The right side, you can see it wrapping around. This one is right on. The right part's right on the corner there. So I think I've been using the wrong term for those. Those aren't ramparts. Those are, I just looked it up. Those are bastions, actually. Those things on the outside wall there, the raised portions. They would actually need a walkway through them, which I didn't draw in here, but anyway, just working through my perspective here, lining things up. And I need to get a little bit of space, a little bit of distance between the main building in the center of that circle and the back wall. Yeah, this is the round brush part I was talking about a little bit earlier. This is where I'm just really focused on the form and structure of everything and not really thinking about my stroke quality. Definitely would have been faster to copy and paste here. I don't know why I didn't do that. I just manually drew this out. Copy and paste the pieces. Like it's symmetrical. That the building is symmetrical, so I could have just copied and pasted that. Left half the building there and put it over there on the right, but I just drew it out. Not sure why. So what I realized right here was when I drew out the platform was that I wanted this to be a circular platform around the front of that. It's not a concentric circle with the main central column, main central cylinder with the big dome. It's off to the side of that. So I needed to bring that out, and now I can bring out my platform from there. Just want to make it a little bit more clear, read a little bit more clearly that that is a circle. You can see my cursor going back and forth. I'm just mentally measuring. I will just drag the cursor over without drawing, just to get a mental measurement of how long something is when I'm doing something symmetrical like this, and try to make the mental adjustments for the other side. So I realized I've got a measuring problem, and I can't figure out why. It takes me forever to figure out what's wrong here. But the building doesn't look symmetrical. This is why paintings like this take 16 hours. If you know exactly what you're going to paint up front, you could probably paint this in 2 or 3, but there's so much trial and error happening. It just takes a little bit longer. I know something's wrong with this, I just can't figure out exactly what it is. I mean, I eventually do figure it out, but at this point, I'm still trial and error, trying to figure it out. I'm going to add to this anyway, so I'm going to raise this up. This will cover up a lot of that part anyway. It's funny, after drawing this, going through the process of trying to figure out what's wrong with this, looking at it now, it's really obvious, but at the time it wasn't. And that's the thing about painting things like this, is you learn so much as you do it. But if I were to sit down and do this again, it would be much faster. Now I'm trying to go back and clean up, or I guess actually mess up the round brush strokes that I was doing before. I'm trying to make this feel a little bit messier. It's a little too neat and clean. You can see I'm trying to have gradients in every surface so that it transitions from one color, hue, and value along a surface I try to do that everywhere, but even so, it still feels a little bit dead, a little bit boring. The color is too monochromatic here, and it just doesn't feel alive. So I'm trying to inject some life back into this. And I don't think I was super successful with that, but it ends up working enough to not have to redo the whole painting, I think. You see, I'm wrestling with this, with with these surfaces, because I haven't fully designed it yet. I'm still not sure how many levels I want to go, how many levels out and up I want to go on all these. So it's still kind of very much a work in progress. So you can see I'm going, well, okay, well, how much shadow do I go on that left side? How much? Trying to remove some of that hardness, the sharpness of those round brush strokes. And I will often just leave them blurry if they're in the shadow. Cleaning up the file a little bit, merging everything together. Where I'm at with it, I'm good enough to move forward now with this. It's not perfect, but roughing it up a little bit, but I was good enough to just merge it all together. I don't need those layers anymore. This file's pretty big. It's 10,000 pixels wide. So, you know, I sometimes do get unruly with the number of layers, but I try to keep it low to as low as possible. Throwing in some random colors here and there to make it come alive. Feels a little dead. I'm going to start cleaning up the sky a little bit. Make the silhouette of this read a little better. Yeah, now it's time for the second city. The base of this city is a lot cleaner than the larger city underneath because it was not attached to the ground like the other one was. So it'll have a nice clean designed base. I really struggled with the perspective of this one because I was flattening it out. I was flattening out the perspective. I didn't want it to feel I didn't want to really feel the perspective a ton. And this is sitting above the horizon line, so it is going to bow up. You're going to see underneath the ellipse. But I also wanted it to feel slightly orthographic. So I was kind of balancing that, kind of walking that tightrope there of orthographic with perspective. So again, this just like before, this is a symmetrical city in some ways, but it's turned to the camera, so it's not a perfectly straight-on symmetrical shot. So I can only do the center portion of this city in symmetry, and the rest I have to draw in perspective. So I just work from the base tower and use that as kind of my anchor point for the rest, and then just get my lighting set up on the cone. So I've got some ridges on that bottom cone, and I want to be able to suggest that detail without really being super specific with it. So it's always this dance. The same thing with the city that I'm drawing now up on top. I know what the details are. I've drawn this city several times, different from different camera angles, and I know what I want there. But I don't want it to feel too prescribed. I don't want it to feel too perfect and precise. I want it to feel rough, like it just kind of emerged from this mass of paint. Obviously keeping the lighting scheme exactly the same as the city below. contrast to happen everywhere, including in size, and that spire just felt way too close to the size of the main center spire. Get my perspective here on that ellipse on that dome. I went a bit cooler with this fill light from the sky than I did on the lower city. It just wasn't reading because I'm so in the sky here. I needed a lighter value, but I also wanted it to contrast, so I added some blue in there. So it feels a little bit different from the city below, but hopefully it feels like it still works. So it's hard in these voiceovers to really know what to comment on or what to. This all just so much of this just happens in my head. It's unclear what to say, what is not totally obvious. I don't want to just sit here and say totally obvious things. But I'm trying to rough up this bottom section, this bottom cone here. Get a little bit of that blue fill light in there. Get rid of the hard edges. But I still want to define what's happening there. I don't want this to feel like the same base as the other one, because it's not. Structurally, it's different. They're both inverted cones, pointing down, but one is, basically like a pyramid. It's not really a cone. It's more of a pyramid with, kind of has 4 sides, 4 angles to it, but it's rough, it's rock, it's torn, it's hewn out of the rock, the ground below. And this one is craftsmanship. This one is forged. This one is created. It's molded. And it's got geometric patterns on it that are precise and controlled. And so I want to be able to suggest that. I've drawn this out in lines a couple times before this, just thinking through what that base would look like. And so I want to be able to suggest that and still have it feel rough, still have it feel like it fits within this painting structure where it just emerged out of that chaos. So I'm starting to get a little bit closer here. You can see I'm trying to get those geometric grooves in. But it still doesn't quite read like I want it to, so I do have to get a little bit more specific here. Here, making sure my ellipse meets at the same horizontal level. One side's not higher than the other. Roughing it up, taking out the round brush strokes. Really going for that contrast of the warm light with the cool shadows. Although those shadows are pretty warm up there. Cooler than that super bright orange sunlight. There we go. Now I'm starting to get into defining the form here. So I really only did it on the lit side. I hint at it in the shadow side, but let's do it on quick lines to the same point at the bottom of that cone. So I just needed that for a marker, and then I delete that layer that I just flipped over. That's one of the shadows from it. Building up a little bit more of a core shadow. Fill light on the top surface. Roughing it up now. Yeah, so I had to move my hotspot over just a little bit. On the cylindrical surfaces, you can see I did on the bottom there. I made the hotspot over from the far right side. So the far right side got darker, and the hotspot was offset to the left there, and I had to replicate that on the top part of the city too. Now I'm about to make this its own layer. I had symmetry on it. I was erasing over here, but I forgot the thing wasn't symmetrical. So I had to redo that. Yeah. So I'm turning on my vertical symmetry path just to check to make sure my ellipse guide is dead center in the page. It's easier if I just keep that centered in the page, so I can just throw on my symmetry path in Photoshop without having to worry about whether it's going to be actually in the middle. Just make sure that my drawing is precise in there. So if I can make sure when I'm creating that path that it's dead center, then I know I can just set that symmetry path and be good to go. You can move the symmetry path, but by default it just starts on the center of the canvas. Kept a really rough brush for this erasing job here. Different from the one below. I probably should have kept this a little more solid. Yeah, so now that I separated that out onto its own layer, I duplicated it all to separate it out. Now I just want the background separated on its own. So I've got that on its own layer. Now I want to start working on the environment. So set my horizon. It's going to be right in the center of my perspective grid right there. I was thinking about keeping my horizon, keeping that hot spot kind of offset from the center, as you can see on the horizon line there. It's bright in the middle, and then it goes into that deeper, darker orange on the left, and that little bit darker but still brighter orange on the right. And the hottest spots are kind of offset in the middle there. I'm thinking about my horizon line as a long length of that cylinder that you see on the city, just having it kind of reflect that a little bit. Even though the sun is off camera, the sun is outside of this canvas, the sun is off to the right. That line, that horizon line is just way too harsh. I'm trying to soften it up. Make it a little bit more irregular. This sky is also a little too contrasty, and I will continue to paint over. I'll glaze over it with a round brush just to bring that contrast and that texture down. I do want to make sure I do have texture there, though. I love texture in the sky. In fact, if I had a choice, like if I had to choose, I would have texture in the sky and flat ground as opposed to texture in the ground and flat sky. I just love texture in the sky for some reason. I always have. Luckily, I don't have to choose. I have texture in both, so it works. Painting some mountains over here. I'm going to kind of nest this in mountains, but I don't want this background to feel symmetrical either. I'm always fighting the symmetry look in these center composition images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the land and the ground and the water, have both of those kind of cut into those mountains and have that be visible from this viewpoint. And then I'm going to bring those left mountains. Oh, right here. Yeah. This is fun. So I'm creating a texture, again, like I did in the beginning, but I'm just creating a different, a different series of textures and patterns together here that I'm going to skew into perspective and kind of overlay a series of these to create variations in the ground. And the nice benefit of that was that those broken pieces of paint there, they look a little bit like islands and inlets within that bay. So it breaks up that hard line pretty nicely. Want some dappled light in here coming in from the clouds in the sky, a little bit's coming through. So I went with a warm texture to overlay on that background. Now I'm going to lay a really nice cool blue texture next to it. You really get a lot of mileage from this. Bringing in another vanishing point here because I'm going to have these mountains converge on that different vanishing point. It's not going to converge right in the center of the painting. I'm going to actually eventually bring these over and have them kind of overlap. Overlap on the city, I mean. It's going to come further over towards the middle of the painting. And so I want the top of this mountain to kind of converge on that vanishing point there. But that's the only place that I ever reference that second vanishing point. When I was painting that little mountain there, it initially looked almost identical to the dome on the city. Saw that and had to change that pretty quick. You don't want two things of the same size sitting right beside each other, obviously, so got to differentiate this. Trying to get a little bit of a blue sky peeking through. This is it's kind of a rough apocalyptic time in this story. So the sky's just got tons of stuff in it, and so just kind of trying to get a little hint of the blue sky peeking through, but mostly there's tons of particulate in the air, giving it that really warm, almost red hue. But there's just a little bit of hope peeking through. Sharpening my sky texture right there. I will sometimes do that. I love sharpened texture. It's tempting to overdo it. Knocking those mountains back into the background there. Knock it back a little more here with some mist. Yeah. Now watching this back, I really didn't need that orange hue on top of that mountain there. I'd like to go back and redo that. But what I was going to do is just bring in a little bit of that warmth that you see in the cities and bring that into the backside of those almost lit surfaces of those mountains. That's what I was trying to do there. And that orange does work on those mountains and these ones right here. Yeah, that does work for me, but not so much on those right side mountains. I'm using the scratch texture to kind of bring everything together and hide the edges in a way that everything feels coherent, like it feels like everything belongs in the same painting. This is also difficult not to overdo, and I probably did overdo it a little bit here, but just cleaning up my file here, merging everything together. So I've got a background and then I've got my subject on top of my background. Deleting out all the old painting. And I'm keeping my ellipse guides. I never use them again, but I kept them there just in case. And that's what's in that group 2. Now I'm going to work a little bit closer to the foreground here. I think this next piece of ground texture I get a lot of mileage with. I end up using this twice in here. I end up using, I think, the whole thing on the left side of my city and on the right side of my city. And I stamp it out a little bit so you can't tell that it's repeating. But I am covering the whole, most of a good quarter of the image with this texture here. This one goes a long way. And I don't like the texture that's underneath already. Like, that texture's way too soft. I scaled it up way too big and it lost all of its texture. It's just mush. I want to get some of that crunchiness back in there. That's why I'm redoing this texture. And that's why I'm keeping it small here, because the mushiness of what I did before has really been bothering me this whole time. So I'm using this new texture to kind of fix that. Need the crunchiness. It didn't matter as much as in the background towards the horizon, because the details should be disappearing there anyway. So as long as that gets mushy, that's fine. And you can see I smoothed it out with the glazing round brush anyway. But yeah, right here I'm stamping out the repeating patterns. But I do want that crunchiness, that texture a lot closer to the camera. And I'm seeing if I can salvage that mushy texture with that sharpen brush right here. But it does not work. I'm unable to do that. I was thinking about having glacial grooves carved into this ground. So you can see I'm kind of playing with that idea here. Cutting in some grooves, cutting in maybe that's water, it's blue. I was thinking maybe it's water, maybe it's something else, I don't know. The back blue that's up by the top of the city there, that is not intended to be water at all. It's just a cooler texture. And so I'm kind of thinking about this being water, but I wasn't totally married to that idea. I just wanted something to cool off the warms that are everywhere in this painting. Just roughing up that ground. This crater's fun. I ended up painting this a couple of times. This is the first time, and it works, but I couldn't tell. Something was bothering me about it, and it didn't dawn on me until I get near the end of the painting what was wrong. You can, it's way too much specular is what was wrong. The values were way too high, and then the shadows were way too dark. So I just kept the shadows dark and brought the highlights down a little bit lower, and basically eliminated the specular later on. But right here, I'll really get into some bright white specular highlights that just don't work for this type of rock material anyway. And I want this, I want the crater to be irregular, to have an irregular surface on the top of that cone. I don't want it to be a round cylinder, but I want it to be broken, like pieces broke away. Thinking about my light source here, I'm thinking about the cast shadow on the side of that wall. And I'm also thinking about, where this is going to cast the shadow onto the background on the side there, and then where the inside of the crater is going to cast shadow onto that back wall. I'm thinking about, I also am right here I'm doing the side, but a second ago I was also thinking about that fill light on the top surface of the cylinder, of the crater. You've got the side that goes up on the cone that's bright and specular, and then you've got the side that goes down inside of it that's in shadow. But there's that piece in the middle. I'll get to it here in just a minute. And I had to find the right value for that as well. A lot of trial and error. Yeah, I'm just trying to break up that surface, that rock jagged surface there. And I don't want my shadows to be uniform. I don't want them to be the same size. I want them all to be different sizes. So it feels contrast. I feel the size contrast everywhere I look. Yeah, here's what I'm doing the top surface. Nope, I'm still getting specular in there, never mind. Yeah, there's the top surface. I made this transition to the flat ground way more harder than it needed to be. And then I brought the sunlight a little far on that side, a little bit further on that side than I should have. Cool off all those worms. Bringing that shadow straight back. That's a total side key light there. Yeah, I'm thinking about my foreground now. I need a foreground element. There's someone watching this happen. I need somewhere for this person to stand. Yeah, I'm done with that mushiness on that side there, so I'm creating a new texture that I'm going to put into perspective just like I did on the other ones. Really need some crunchiness close to the camera. So I'm skewing it in that direction where it's coming from the bottom corner, bottom right corner up to the top left corner in that diagonal way, because I'm trying to, everything else seemed to be going in the opposite direction. So I'm trying to get some balance happening in this composition here. Instead of having everything flow from the bottom left corner to the top right, changing it up here. Bottom right corner to top left. Creating kind of an intersection there that meets right where the city is. I'm adding these little shadows to the ground because I'm trying to get the scale to feel massive. I mean, that city, the top little tiny city, is a huge city where, you know, a person would be microscopic up there at this, from this scale basically. And so I want this ground to feel like we're really far away from it. It's almost like an aerial photo. Completely leaned into the water at this point. It is water, I've decided, but I am going to end up redoing quite a bit of that. Now I'm doing the glacial cuts. I mentioned earlier I was thinking about doing glacial cuts on this thing. So this is an experiment that failed and I ended up getting rid of this, but the idea was to just create this, you know, kind of swirling pattern like you'd see in Iceland or something, where, you know, these cuts have been made in the ground and all these different types of silicate and ground materials have been deposited, and so there's just this real neat texture and contrast across the landscape. So I was going to recreate that a little bit here, create that kind of pattern as if something flowed down through here, and throw in some different textures and materials within this, but the ground was already so textury and crunchy that this ended up making it feel just jumbled and messy. Couldn't even read it. But it was a fun experiment. I've done this before in other paintings, and it did work at other times, but the ground wasn't as crunchy at those images, and I just was too in love with the texture to make this work. So, you know, it's things like this that also cause the runtime to go up, you know, cause the 16-hour image, because there's a lot of trial and error, and it's just trying things that work and don't work, and you throw stuff away and start over and that kind of thing. So the whole process is it's not always reflected in what you can see in the final image. There's usually a lot that went into it that got thrown away. It's just like any creative process, music or anything. So I'm just going to mask this texture with that white swirl that I just made. But I just couldn't make it work. I thought maybe there's too much texture in my texture, so I thought blurring it out might work, and no, that didn't help. So I thought, well, maybe there's too much showing. Maybe if I erase some, maybe that'll help. It's amazing what thought process you go through trying to make something work, because you don't want to lose what you just did because of the time you invested into it. But I actually didn't stay with this very long. I abandoned it here pretty quick. I did actually. I stuck with this a little bit longer than I remembered. I just was so bent on the directionality of it. I wanted to bring that curve that's curving down to the bottom right of the image. I really wanted something to shift the directionality of the page so that it wasn't all going the same direction. So you can see that's why I lightened it over on that right side and on the left. Just trying to make it feel a little bit more distributed. If you make the direction feel more distributed, instead of just going one direction. Now I'm envisioning these bits of the rock kind of they're just, the clumps of the dirt coming up with it as it's rising up out of the ground. These pieces are falling off. Just trying to get a little bit of action in the image, sense of motion, kind of showing which direction the city is going. It's ascending, not descending. Did all that I duplicated that layer and blurred it, but that blur ended up not working out, so yeah, get rid of the blur right there. I do blur certain parts of it, but it wasn't a uniform blur. That didn't help it at all. So at this point, I want to be done with the image. I really do. I want to be done. So I'm throwing in my foreground character, and I'm thinking maybe I can just leave this. Maybe it can work, but I realized I wrestled with this guy for a little bit. It just wasn't feeling right, and then the ground was just overwhelmingly bad. So I ended up redoing this. You'll see in a minute. And my foreground was symmetrical, and that was bothering me as well. I had the the foreground conveniently not showing where the crater was, and then rising up on both sides of the crater as if it was a mirror. So I had to break that up. Cleaning up my foreground here, I'm going to make this a little bit darker. Try to bring it a little bit closer to the foreground. But it just feels silhouetted against the front of the rest of that. Yeah, I even do the mist here. Trying to silhouette that against that foreground, and it just is not working. A little bit of magic happening in that crater there to cause the city to rise. pits are catching some of that light from that glowing crater. Throwing some reflected light on that wall. I realize that light probably isn't going to shine up that high, especially in these lighting conditions, but I really want some more color in that rock, in the base of that city. When in doubt, use a lens flare. This did help with the environment, but it sure did not save the painting like I hoped it would. Yeah, at this point, I'm hoping I have a finished painting. I feel like the crater's a little bit tall, so I want to lengthen it, or push it a little bit closer, a little bit more of a narrow ellipse. Maybe that'll fix it, but it didn't. Flipping the canvas horizontally to see if I like it, just to give me a fresh perspective on it. A lot of times I'll just rotate the canvas and look at it upside down, because the images I work with are so huge, it does take a little bit to flip it horizontally. You can see the spinning wheel there as it's thinking. Get a little bit more detail in the sky. The sky was a little flat, so I need some clouds happening in here. And I want this a little bit darker towards the top of the, kind of like a vignette. I want a little bit darker towards the top of the frame. Tiny moments of highlight in the sky with those clouds. Trying to balance this without overdoing it, always a challenge. At this point, I just moved on to the sky because I just couldn't. I had to get away from the ground and the foreground a little bit. It was just. I thought maybe I'd gotten too close to it, so if I step away and don't look at it for a little bit, I'll come back to it with some fresh eyes. So let me just work on this sky and see what it feels like. I really like those colors in that sky right there. Yeah, my sun's on that side, so I need to have that a lot brighter than the other side of the screen. And I'm hitting that horizon with some bright light over on that other side, so I've got to compensate over here. And so I'm trying to bring not only brighter light over here, but a little bit more texture. Just draw the eye a little bit closer to the light. And it's a balance of texture. You've got the texture in the sky, texture in the ground, and then you've got your foreground elements, your main subject elements. And there needs to be a hierarchy of texture just like everything else. So I don't want the texture to be overwhelming in the sky or overwhelming in the ground where it competes with my focal point. I want it to complement. And that's often a challenge. Just like going really bright with those clouds. Really got to darken those up. I want it to feel like there's a little bit of light peeking out from that heavy cloud overcast. And I want there to feel like there's a kind of an energy that's tying those two cities together. I'm not trying to be too overt with it, but there's something there. It's why I'm using that scratch texture for it, so that it suggests it, but it's not a definite sky beam or anything. It's just there's something that's connecting them. And then I'm going to go above this city, right here. Oh, highlights on the spires first, and kind of tie it a little bit higher up to the heavens. Man, skies can be so tricky to draw, but they're so rewarding and so fun to do it. You can really play and explore it, and you really can mess it up too. It's surprisingly easy to mess up something that should be so abstract and easy to do. You would think it would be easy to draw clouds in the sky, but to get it to look right, there is a real art to it, and I don't feel like I've ever nailed it. Paint texture in the sky. Yeah, I gave up at that point. I'm like, you know what, this is just not working here. Trying to get this guy to work in this painting. I needed a fresh take. So I had to step away, just created a new canvas. And let's just see if I can get this right. Because this was not working in that painting at all. Tried several options here. Just playing with the pose. See if I can see if I can at least get the pose right first. Let's see if get that pose right and then work on. I'm not super concerned about the design of the character at this point. I just want something that kind of holds its space there, but it does need to feel composited in the scene. It needs to feel correct, the lighting and composition, with the lighting and the pose and the way that it fits in the composition. It's got to feel like it matches the scene. This one is more of a female option here. I ended up way more comfortable drawing male than female, but thought maybe this could work. I end up doing keeping it male though. Even though that pose isn't perfect and that pose is pretty rough, I could just sit there and spin my wheels trying to get it right all day. Or I decided to just move ahead into paint, see if that would rescue it. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the paint helps me see what's really wrong structurally underneath, and it saves me time. Other times, the structure is totally broken and the paint won't fix it. I can't see what's wrong, so I have to just get it right with lines before. So it really depends on the pose, depends on the day, weirdly. I don't know why it's not a constant thing for me. But what I ended up doing here that actually did save a ton of time was just going ahead and dropping the skirt all the way to the ground. I've drawn a lot of legs. Legs are hard to draw, but I've drawn a lot of legs, and sometimes it's just easier to cover them up. Yeah, I worked with the skirt for quite a while before I cover it up. I've got to move on. I've got to get this painting done. Getting that ellipse in a way that it feels like I'm looking down on this character. Thinking about where that hood meets the shoulder blades, or meets the back shoulders and back. And then I'm trying to render my plane changes here from the rounding of the shoulders into the back. I am thinking about my anatomy underneath. Thinking about how the light might hit. So he is going to have a slightly different, well, very different lighting scenario than the main city because he's in shadow in that foreground. I don't want him silhouetted out though. I do want there still to be detail. But he's just not sitting in that bright key light of the sun. There's a shadow being cast on him. Those lats in there. Getting that bounce light from that green sleeve, bouncing it onto the torso. Yeah, so I was going to start over on the legs, and when I blurred it out, I just saw that, wow, this just feels better with the bottom half covered up like that. Sometimes it just works. Just keep all the detail on one part of the figure, kill the rest. And for some reason it helps the eye. So think about how this cloth is wrapping around the body there. And then, yeah, put those hands in there. Yeah, getting some of that bounce light. Think about that form change. Top of the buttocks there, going back down into the back of the legs. Bounce light from the hands. Might have gotten a little too bright with that specular there, but I always like to throw a lot of reds, a lot of color into the hands and flesh to kind of simulate an exaggerated subsurface scattering. I try to avoid super dark brown shadows on humans whenever I can. Skew it into perspective there, make it feel like we're looking down a little bit more. Yeah, I thought this would rescue the foreground if I put a little bit more care into that figure. Get a little bit of bloom from the sky coming around those surfaces there. They wouldn't perfectly block out the light. They're too narrow of structures to do that. I think I'm creating a foreground texture here because that foreground is just a block. It's just a mass of black. And I need to put a little more care into this foreground. It looks sloppy and lazy, so I'm putting together something for this foreground in an attempt to rescue it. At this point, I recognize it doesn't look good. Yeah, get back to the original composition. And I'm not sure what my problem is at this point. I figure it out, but at this point I'm still thinking maybe it's because I haven't put enough care into the foreground. Might be what my problem is. It's amazing how clear the problem is to me right now that I couldn't see it at this point. Just carving into this rock. I love painting rocks. It's like sculpting. Just feel the forms, what's turning up, what's turning out. If I'm stressed or whatever, I'll just go paint rocks. That light from the sky really bright blue here, just because I want to contrast that foreground from the rest of the image. The rest of the image is so warm, and I know that sky is super warm, but I've got to have a separation here, and so I'm looking for it through color temperature. I think if I scratch it, it'll look better. Yeah, at this point I do know it's broken. I'm just trying to figure out why. Yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, let's do a better job of the foreground. So let me paint some rocks for real instead of this little slab. So I'm going in and I'm going to make an interesting foreground that has some nice twists and curves that can be a nice contrast to the flatness of the ground, and that can also fit within the kind of round composition that I have with the city and the crater. See if I can complement that in the foreground rocks and have that contrast with the flatness of the valley. And it's just fun to paint rocks. So this is what like I said, it's a last-ditch attempt to try to save this image. I feel like the image is broken at this point, and I'm trying to get this right. But what happens when I put this back into the image is going to unearth the real problem for me, the problem that's actually been bothering me the whole time, and it'll make a lot of sense here in a minute. And I do fix this, and I do rescue this image by the end of it. But you just kind of getting the full picture of the journey that I would normally just not bother showing. Dodging and burning. The thing I love about rock painting is the different colors you can inject in there, and you can inject anything in there and it's going to feel right. There's reds and purples are in there. I've got some greens in there. I've got everything in there, and it just kind of works. Yeah. So here's where I figure out my problem. I couldn't get it to work, and I realized it's cut out here. But what I realized is that my entire composition was broken. It did not connect to the foreground like it should have. And I got to figure out why. At this point, I don't know why. Other than those rocks, I felt like looked pretty cool, but it couldn't fit in this image. And I wanted an image that flowed better from my focal point of the city into the foreground. And there was no flow happening here. It was all focused too much on the city and crater. So I'm redesigning this image here with foreground in mind, and how to make this foreground connect with the city and the crater. So I've repositioned the guy. I made the foreground a little bit more prominent here. And I've also made the crater and the city, I'm making it smaller in the image to see what that feels like. And it actually works a little bit better in my opinion. And you can see I've already thought through the rest of the image, so I can sketch this out really fast. And this also uncovered something else that I really ended up liking and enjoying for this painting, that will be reflected in the final, and I'll do it here in just a second. Yeah, scale this up. But the thing that really stood out to me when I'm done here, oh yeah, I do the background here. Thinking about the directionality of the image, trying not to make it all skew from bottom left to top right, breaking that up. What I'm after here is just an overall composition that works better than what I had before. It goes beyond just cleaning up the texture of the ground and making that a little more simple to read. The overall composition needed help. Yeah, so this is the part that really got unlocked for me, was this shadow area here from the crater. I left it just flat. I put zero detail into it in this little sketch here. And I was trying to get all this texture into the final one, or not texture, but detail into the final image, and it just wasn't working. But look at how flat it is here, and it just really helps the whole image read better. So I ended up just going straight flat with it in the final, and it worked a lot better. I'm still stuck on the specular on that crater, and I haven't figured that part out yet. I'll figure that out in the end to get rid of that specular. That will really unlock the image once I do that. Also, something that you see all the time is you'll see a focal point. I've got my character there. That's the main character standing right in the dead center of the image. A lot of times you'll see a dark character, silhouetted over a highlighted area in the background to kind of draw your eye to that point. And the character is actually not the focal point of this image. The focal point is the city, and so I intentionally kept the background behind the character a lot darker, so there's not as much contrast there. The highlights, the brighter sections are to the right of the character, are right. Yeah, I guess it's right too. So that was intentional. Yeah, keeping that section dark. I was thinking about a little bit of him peeking through, getting a little bit of specular. But I ended up just casting the whole character in shadow. So I'm thinking about my composition. It's a centered composition. But I'm thinking about different crops of this. I'm thinking about, if I were to look at this on an iPhone, just vertical crop there from the center. So center figure all the way up to the little tiny city at the top. That strip right there, if I were to crop that to an iPhone, that would work really well. That would be a really strong wallpaper, for example. So I was thinking about that, how the other composition wouldn't really work for that because it's off to the right. So you'd have to have a little bit bigger of a section there to capture him in the photo in the crop. So I'm going to just grab the images or the pieces that I like from the other painting onto this one. And this is where the image really starts to take off. I love content-aware fill. That is the greatest invention. So now I've got a clean background to work with. Let's get that. I'm going to get that foreground here and reposition this so that it fits the scale of the new sketch. See how much bigger the crater is of the old crater? Yeah, so get that to match the new sketch. There we go. Yeah, I'm checking my layers to see if there's anything else I want to bring over. I do like those textures. I feel like those might come in handy later, so I bring them over to the new sketch. Yeah, just bring those over and hide them, and then I'm going to abandon this one. Yeah, that one's done. Yeah, just get that paint texture, line it up. A little bit of that detail back in. Yep, one more texture. Get my glow, resize this. Yep, now that other image is done. I'm done. Let's move on to the new one here. Let's get this foreground working and get this composition right. Obliterate that foreground. So we can get the new one in. Just pulling that other image up just so I can look at it the whole time. And the shadows area hasn't internalized for me yet. I still think I still need a little bit of variation in there, a little bit of texture in that shadow. But the more I look at that image up there as I'm working, the more I realize just how great that total flat shadow is. And I will adjust accordingly here very soon. At one point here, as you don't see it in the video because I paused the recording on it, actually, but there's one point where I'm on the phone, or I'm on a call, and I've got this image up on my other screen as I'm on this call. And the problem with this image finally dawns on me as I'm on that call. And this specular area that I'm working on right here, it hits me as I've got this, as I'm zoomed out and I'm just sitting there looking at this image, it dawns on me that value is entirely too bright, and I'm still going with it here. I don't see it yet, but it dawns on me here very shortly that specular area is too bright, and it actually needs to be the value of that foreground on the right side, that orange foreground. That's actually what my highlight area should be, and that orange foreground should be darkened. Yeah, I'm still working through the ground here. Yeah, here's where I figure it out, to just obliterate the detail in that shadow section. It's going to really help my focal point. And it just cleans up the overall image. Helps sell the illusion of light. I don't know what this piece is I'm painting over here. I doodled it in the black and white sketch above. It's something to hold the composition over there, but I never really took the time to figure out what it was. It's a rock or something, but thinking about my top surface, fill light from the sky, cooler than the highlight section. I'm going to drop the opacity of this a little bit. I just want to signal, just lightly signify a plane change. Now it's sloping off of that cone, that crater, but still want to keep it all mostly single value. Bringing in the foreground here, this shape I just drew randomly, thinking only about composition and shape that could break up the composition and lead your eye, kind of guide the eye around the painting in the right way. Feel balanced. I'm not thinking about things like how does he get there? How did he position himself right there? I'm not really too worried about that. And as I mentioned before, darkening background behind him a little bit so that I don't want to draw the eye too much there. He's not the main focal point. He's a secondary read. Yeah, so I think, I end up painting out the entire foreground, these foreground rocks, before I figure out the value problem I've got. I'm thinking roughly about what I'm doing here. Oh, right there. What I'll do is I will take a layer and put it in a group and hide the group, but keep the layer eyeball on so you can paint on it. If the eyeball's off, it won't let you paint. So I put it in a group. And then I can paint. Yeah, I'm painting while I can see what's underneath it. It's just a beautiful feature of Photoshop there. So I'm painting these top surfaces based on my sketch underneath with a lighter value, and then I'll paint the side darker values with it off as well. Yeah, but mostly getting my top surfaces here that are facing the sky, getting those blocked in. Detailing in the shadow areas of my foreground. Again, I don't want this foreground to just be a dark silhouette. I felt like it was, to have a finished painting, I really wanted to look like I thought through the foreground. Even though I didn't give it a ton of thought. But I'm thinking here, so I'm breaking this up, and I've got a problem. I've got a slanted side next to a flat surface. I had to break up the plane change there. Yeah, so I'm trying to make the slope side, it'll be a little bit darker than the flat side. On the slope side facing that way, facing the left. And then the slope sides facing the right will be a little bit brighter than the flat surfaces. And vertical surfaces facing the right will be the brightest. Work on directionality for surfaces. So the paint strokes try to go in the direction of the surface, just to help it read a little bit better. I don't always do that, but most of the time. It's already starting to feel like rock when you zoom out and squint your eyes. That's really what I'm trying to pass, is the squint test. Get some nice oranges in there with the blues, just a hint of the warm. Even though I do want this overall foreground to be overall cool, I do want a hint of warm just for variation. Helps the eye. Yeah, I did a warm fill light from the other side. Now I'm thinking about cast shadows. What is getting the most light? What is being hidden from the light? Totally forgot that top surface over here. Thinking about it, it's going to get more light the higher in altitude it goes. The lower it goes, the less light. Yeah, here's where I figured it out. That foreground, that needs to be my highlight value. That's my specular. So I need to do this and then darken the rest of that foreground because of the plane change. Here's where I darken it. Yeah, now that reads a lot better. Put that same value on the back of that crater also. Back of that lit side. I'm still not sure why I did this part, but it ended up working. Like I felt like the blue mist inside was enough before I did that. I still don't know why I did that, but it does work. Blending this into the flat ground now. Can't have a hard line there, obviously. It's getting a nice taper. I am working on this and then realizing, oh wait, this is probably covered up by my foreground. Yep, and there it is. So I just focus on up above there now. So on these shadow areas of the rock, I want to make sure that they are different in diameter and width from the others. I don't want it to feel like uniform cuts. So I do, right now they feel kind of uniform. Those three, that 1, 2, 3, they feel uniform. So I do go back and fix that. I see it a little bit here. It really, yeah, so I'm trying to make it bigger and make this next one smaller, but it still ends up feeling too uniform, so I have to fix it. Yeah, here's where I bring the value down that back surface. Feels much better after I do this. Yeah, get rid of that. Whew. And get a transition there from that gray to the orange. That really helped it as well. Even though it's all in the light, just that gradient seems to help it for some reason. And I don't want this to feel like a perfect circle either. I want to break it up. So I'm bringing some surfaces, some points of it higher, some lower. Just to break it up, make it feel a little more jagged. A little more broken. It's a violent event that brought the divine city up out of there. Yeah, that just feels so much better bringing that value down. And if you squint your eyes, you can still see a strong value shift between the flat ground and the vertical plane. It just didn't need to be as extreme as I had it. There's the top surface that I forgot before. All right, now I've got to differentiate that from that slope surface. They're both the same value. Yeah, a little bit of ambient occlusion. So here I'm just committing to the water and breaking up the ground a little bit more here, because when I did the fill, the content aware fill, it flattened all that out. So I'm going to bring some of that texture and crunchiness back. Yeah, I've committed to the water at this point. I still want it to look like an aerial photo. I'm just trying to break it up, give it a little bit of detail. Like small detail. Make it feel like we're really far away from this. And I realize as far as we are away from this, with the detail that I'm putting in there, the foreground guy is way too big. But I want the guy to show up. So the scale is a little bit off. It's just intentional for storytelling purposes, but technically he should probably be microscopic, as far away as we are. But then we wouldn't see the character, and that's no good, so. Oh yeah, this is the hero of the painting right here. This piece that, for some reason, that just worked for me. I don't know, there's weird things that I attach to in these images, and this is one of them. This red and white piece that just came through on the ground, that stretched off all the way into the horizon. Well, I think I eventually take it to the horizon, but just the way that it really helps sell the shape of that city by the way that it's cut off right there and continues on through the other side. Yeah, I start breaking it up the further away it gets. Just trying to add little bits of detail here and there to make it feel like a lot's going on. A few tiny strokes. I'm just trying to think about interesting patterns of water flow here that would help the composition. I'm thinking about thick and thin. I'm thinking about conjoining water flows to each other. I'm not thinking about necessarily running to that ocean, that body of water on the horizon, or anything like that. Yeah, the edges of this city were way too clean here. I need to break this up. But it's not crumbling like the other one. I just want it broken up. Like maybe there's a little bit of dust and stuff coming off of it because of the event that just brought it up, but nothing like what's happening below. I just want to break this up a little bit. Make those spires a little more visible when you zoom out. Getting a little lost. Now I'm going to make that connection. That divine energy connection between the two cities. I'm just such a sucker for this scratch texture. It's just my favorite. You can do so much with it. It really is a perfect blender. Yeah, so bringing that specular down on the crater really helps sell the difference between the material there and the material of the white stone on the Divine City. They were too similar before, and now they're really differentiated even at a glance. Yeah, get my lens flare back in here. I didn't bring that sky over. So I think, yeah, I started working on the sky here. I didn't bring that sky over, so I've got to kind of redo that. I wasn't happy with what it looked like anyway. I think the second one is a little bit more successful. I was super tempted to leave it flat and let it, just have a flat sky contrasted with the really textural landscape. But every time I walked away, it felt like it was just really needing a little bit more happening in this sky. It felt incomplete. getting close to the end here. I'm just finalizing this sky here, but something's not going to sit right with me at the end of this here. That's with the foreground. The sky's a little rough. I like the hand-painted feel though, but I feel like the foreground character was not great. It just wasn't there. I felt like it just felt a little cliche, a little not thought through enough. I want a little bit more design in this, a little bit more interesting pose than just standing there, both arms down. So just trying to break it up a little bit. I figure I'd take one last pass at this thing before I call it done. So rather than just wearing a big robe, this guy's got armor. And I did kind of an asymmetrical thing with the armor, left side bigger than the right. Just trying to break the idea of symmetry as much as I can in this. It's a center composition, so on those types of compositions I want to break up the symmetry and monotony as much as possible. So just finding interesting ways to make something asymmetrical is what I'm after. So I make the one side shoulder pad bigger and I put the armor off to one side, the armor detail off to one side. And work around that. Again, doing that nested group, hidden group thing so I can hide it and still work on that hidden layer. Just trying to get the silhouette to match the original sketch, erasing out the parts of paint that don't fit. Get some of that red subsurface scattering happening on the flesh. That is exposed skin there. And then get a little bit of blue fill light on there. That blue fill light, for whatever reason, really worked that flesh tone. But I'm thinking about how can I make this asymmetric and still work and still feel correct, not feel like a mistake. Yeah, so I've got kind of the normal size shoulder pad over there and then the gigantic shoulder pad on that left side. Forearm armor. It's like a metal disc on his back here, his left shoulder. I've had to draw a lot of hands in my career. I've been a product designer for a long time and often have had to draw hands holding smartphones to demonstrate app features. So I've had to draw hands first. So I've drawn more hands than any other part of the body, probably. It's a cloth sash wrapped around the belt. It's a high-waisted belt with a mid-level sash there. And then kind of like a dual kilt skirt thing with some battle armor on top. I was going to just let that left leg bleed into the kilt there, but I really wanted to suggest some detail there, that leg and the armor on it. I love drawing feet. I love drawing heels. I love the shape of the foot. Done a lot of shoe design, and I just really love it. Getting the silhouette of a foot and the different shapes together. It just has always been so pleasing to me. Just the overall forms from every angle. It's beautiful. Content-aware Phil to the rescue again. So I just dropped him in there. He doesn't feel super composited, so I've got to, try to get him to fit in there a little bit better. So I put a gradient map on there, faded out to the top. Still isn't working, so I've got to tie it in with the correct fill lights and stuff. And I'm on the home stretch here. This image is just about done. Getting that blue fill light in to match what's on those rocks. Thinking about the different materials that are happening on that armor. Some are going to put out a much brighter specular than others. Now I'm putting that warm fill light from that left side. Same as is on the rocks. I know that fill light's a little bright there. I'm just trying to make sure the form can read. Fix this section over here and call it done. Yeah, those edges were a little rough. I want to mess those up a little bit. They're a little too clean. Yep, and there it is. The final image. Well, thank you for joining me today, and I'm going to be uploading these. I won't be uploading as long ones in the future, I don't think. It'll be much shorter, but anyway, let me know if there's anything in particular that you had questions about or anything else you'd like to see, and I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.